Hello there. Many people want a referendum on the eye-wateringly high cost of net zero by 2050 being imposed on them. But our politicians have already stitched us up. Red Wall Tory MPs are calling on the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to give the country a say, a referendum, on the government's ruinously expensive net zero by 2050 plans, reports The Telegraph. Also saying that they are joining with MPs from traditional Tory heartlands who are also warming to the idea in the wake of their cigarette paper thin win in the Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-election after Boris Johnson was forced to resign. And their extremely narrow win is being put down to Londoners' hostility to the Labour Party Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan's ULEZ expansion. Seems the Tories think that making a bit of noise about supporting the motorist and the hard-pressed punter during the cost of living crisis will save them from electoral oblivion. Because that's all it is, noise. There is no way the establishment would allow such a thing, because they know what happened last time. The people gave the wrong answer. Organising a referendum would probably take 18 months as well, and there would have to be time for a national debate. And just like the Brexit referendum, there would need to be two main official campaigns. One for net zero, the other for what exactly? To slow it down or to scrap it entirely? And this would be the real sticking point. More people would vote to slow it down to 2060 or 2070, say. But how many, in the face of this torrent of net zero information, although propaganda might be a more accurate term given some of the outlandish claims, so how many people would vote for a complete stop to net zero plans? And if there is a vote to extend the time frame, we're having net zero anyway. And there would be extreme pressure brought to bear to allow everyone over 16 to vote in the referendum, wouldn't there? Now there is another angle to this. Net zero runs like a piece of barbed wire right through our statute books. It's got to the point that walking back on any of it, even with a short delay, is impossible without repealing and rewriting whole swathes of law. And as I've pointed out before, there's even a climate and environment non-regression clause in the Brexit Trade and Cooperation Agreement the UK signed with the EU, where if either the EU or the UK walks back on certain pledges and it affects the trade or investment of the other side, then legal action could ensue. But after all the grandstanding around the world by politicians over net zero, with promises and legislation to cut emissions and surge ahead with as yet nowhere near fully developed technology and infrastructure, it's becoming clear that the ordinary citizen is going to be severely shortchanged and be left literally out in the cold. And the law is complex in this area. If they row back on one part of the environmental and climate law, they would have to accelerate in another area to compensate for it. Politicians have very little room to manoeuvre given the current legal position. Not only that, as we've seen from the car industry's exasperation at government dithering over whether or not to ban hybrids in the UK by 2030 or 2035, industry needs as much long-term legal stability as it can get. Ducking and weaving over the year to scrap gas boilers, oil burners or petrol and diesel cars is not good for supply chains and business profits. Something that endangers employment for a start, as well as tax revenue. The trouble is that the government thought it had stability in a breakneck speed plan for net zero. Governments around the world and city mayors have all been engaged in some sort of virtue signalling 100-yard sprint for the net zero gold medal to stand atop the podium. The trouble, as ever though, is they would have to trample ruthlessly over the ordinary citizen to get there. They knew that from the start. Be in no doubt. They were fully aware of the impact this would have on the populations. But they are doing it nonetheless. They knew that at some time the people might just get wise and start kicking off. But they pressed on anyway. And maybe the Uxbridge vote is the start of the peasants really starting to hold their political masters, or those who view themselves as such, to account. No wonder there's this push for travel restricting 15-minute cities and low-traffic neighbourhoods, etc. They don't want to give you any opportunity to gather and demonstrate against their plans. Now, had the electorate realised the true bankrupting costs of net zero and all the control and cameras they would face, I doubt very much that they'd have given it the time of day. In fact, many more people would have been questioning the reasoning behind it and may have reached the wrong conclusions. So no doubt our politicians, who appear to value the likes of the World Economic Forum and the UN over us the mere plebs, probably thought the best approach was ignorance is bliss for the masses. They'll take whatever medicine we dish out and happily lap it up, they thought. I mean, it worked during the health emergency, didn't it? So why not now? And that control grid already exists, so why not roll it out again at the right moment? In fact, the ratchet is operating quite neatly as I speak. Just look at Mark Drakeford imposing a 20 mph speed limit on most of the roads in Wales. Is that what the people of Wales really voted for and wanted? And all those low-traffic neighbourhoods springing up under the guise of being a trial. They're not trials, they are designed to become permanent and to expand. Now, One Times article earlier this month talked about the case for net zero being always about short-term pain for long-term gain. Well, no politician has said that to us. No, they kept on talking about green jobs revolutions and cheap energy for all. But the government as well as investors obviously do not believe that, because The Guardian reports that staff shortages, a lack of specialist personnel and low pay are major barriers to achieving net zero, according to workers in the UK environment sector. Yep. According to a survey by the trade union Prospect that has many members in the green sector, there has been a reduction in green sector expert staff, leading them all to be overworked and underpaid. Well, I guess most union members would say that. But it turns out that a fifth of the respondents to the survey hold PhDs, and 38% of the respondents earned less than 30 grand a year. So where are all those green subsidies and green investments going then? Oh, and you would expect this particular sector to be all about equality too. But women earn on average 25 to 30 grand, while men get 30 to 35 grand. Go figure. Anyway, with the amount of dosh sloshing about the green energy system, you'd think anyone involved would be making a packet. But there may well be enough dosh sloshing around to ensure no net zero referendum takes place. You may want a net zero referendum, but what you'll end up with is, no doubt, a zero referendum. If we ever allow the WEF and the UN to tie us down into small, insignificant and unrewarding lives, be in no doubt that our self-serving politicians and their wealthy backers will still be circulating the globe in smart jets, going from opulent setting to opulent setting, eating steak and preening themselves before the world as its saviours, while demanding we pay ever more and eat ever less meat to help them save it. They are not our friends. None of them.